everyone, my name is Zach Daniel. I'm the author of Ash Framework, which is a general purpose application development framework for Elixir. And I'm here today to talk about an extension for that framework called Ash GraphQL, which allows you to easily get a GraphQL from your resource definitions. And resources are sort of the basic building block of Ash Framework apps. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what the application that we have here looks like. It's a result of going through the Getting Started tutorials on the website. And I'm going to show you how I've added Phoenix Framework, which is a web framework for Elixir. It's the sort of de facto way of doing web server stuff, controllers. And we're also going to use Absinthe, which is the de facto tool for GraphQL. So I'm going to breeze by a lot of stuff, and I wouldn't worry too much about the specifics right now. The goal here is actually just to sort of show you what's possible. So what we have here is we have two applications side by side. We have an application called Help Desk. This is the Ash, has all of our sort of Ash Framework app logic in there. And then we have Help Desk Web, which is all the Phoenix logic, which is where you would put things like maybe controllers or things that sort of interact with the outside world or accept requests from the outside world. And in this Help Desk app, we have an API called Tickets. So API is a term in Ash. It's the more generic kind of API, right? It's not a web API. It's a application programming interface, right? And so the idea is that this defines a sort of service of some kind or an API or a context in your application that can be used. And so you can see there's a registry here. This defines what resources are available to use in this API. And in this registry, we have ticket and representative. So as you can see, it's pretty simple. There's not a lot going on. So first I'll show you through ticket. You can see ticket is helpdesk.tickets.ticket. And it's mapped to Postgres data layer. It's stored in the tickets table. So this is all pretty straightforward. There's some actions available. These are like, what can I do with a ticket, right? So I can open a ticket. I can close a ticket. We also have the defaults. These are just sort of basic actions that can be used. And then we can assign a ticket, right? The attributes in this case are going to map to Postgres columns because this resource is using the Postgres data layer. So you have like the status, for example, the subject of the ticket, and then relationships allow you to connect this to other resources in your application, right? So you can see that a ticket belongs to a representative. And so that's like, who is this assigned, right? Or who is this assigned to? So if I look at representative, it looks very similar, a little bit simpler. There's no special actions or anything like that. And you can see it has some attributes which map to the database as well, and it has many tickets. We've also added some more advanced things from Ash Framework, which I'm not going to dive in too deeply, but it's good to show that they're here. There's the tools called aggregate, so that you can sort of get aggregate information about related data like the total tickets, how many are open, how many are closed. There's some calculations which allow you to perform sort of compute things, right? So like in this case, it's the percent open, which is the number of open tickets over the total tickets, that kind of thing. So what I'm going to show here real quick is how you can use these just in code, right? So this framework, even without Ash GraphQL, the point here is that you kind of get the same sort of usage patterns, right? So I'll show you. I probably got a call up here. Yeah. So we can say helpdesk.tickets. That's our API, and then we can say helpdesk.tickets.read, and then helpdesk.tickets.ticket, we'll pass in the ticket. That could accept like a query, so you could filter your data, or that sort of thing. But for now, I'm just going to show you this sort of simple example. We can read our data, and we get the list of tickets that are in the database back. And you can actually see, if I scroll up here, you can see that this ran a SQL query to fetch the tickets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to follow the Getting Started guide for GraphQL on the Ash website, and I will show you sort of how the process of adding a GraphQL to your app. So let me pull it up here. Step one, we're going to add the dependencies that we need to our help desk application. So we need these right here, and actually Absinthe plug is going to live in help desk web because that is a sort of web concern. Mix.x's, okay, and this will go down here. And then we can say mix.get to fetch our dependencies. Okay, so next step, we're going to go and configure how this API, this helpdesk.tickets, will behave in the GraphQL. So we'll add some extensions. Well, we'll add one extension, the AshGraphQL.API extension. And then now that extension is there, we can configure it, and we can say authorize false. Right now, this is just a tool to help us because we don't have any sort of users yet. We don't have authorization policies, also a feature in Ash framework. And so this just sort of turns that whole thing off so that we don't need to deal with it right now. Next step is we're going to go and add some GraphQL to our resources. So let's go to ticket for now. Let's add some basic GraphQL. Step one is we're going to add the extensions. Say AshGraphQL.resource. And now that we've done that, we can configure GraphQL. So first we'll give it a type, call it ticket. This is the sort of object type that it's going to get in the GraphQL. We can say queries, we'll add let's add a list tickets, and then we'll map that to the read action. So this is saying put list tickets in the list tickets resolver, right, in our GraphQL, or field, I guess is the better phrase there, in our GraphQL, and it's going to use the read action on this resource to perform that, to fetch that field. And then let's also go ahead and add a mutation. We'll say you can also open ticket, and we'll use the let's see, we'll use the open action on this resource to open the ticket. Alrighty. So with these things, the next step up is we're going to add an absinthe schema. So absinthe is a sort of de facto tool for building GraphQL as an Elixir. And what Ash does is instead of sort of owning your whole GraphQL, it just is a plugin to absinthe that will build out all the schema for these things, but then you still have the ability to sort of add fully custom stuff, right? So because this is a web thing, we'll put this in our help desk web. This is our Phoenix, sort of Phoenix side of our application. So we'll call this schema.ex. I'll copy the one from the tutorial here, and we'll place my app with help desk. Actually, the help desk web here, and then we'll say helpdesk.tickets is the name of the API, and the registry is helpdesk.tickets.registry. All right, so the last thing to do is we're going to add this to our router. So we're going to add some routes for this so that we can accept requests and so that we can access the GraphQL playground. So the way this looks is I'm going to copy this in again from the tutorial, and we'll connect to this to the helpdesk web.schema, and that's everything that Absinthe needs to know to serve our GraphQL, as well as give us access to the playground. So let's go ahead and start this. And then I will, I'll wait for that to load, and I'll pull in the playground when it's ready. Okay, so you can see with just that, so we haven't defined any like GraphQL types or resolvers or fields or anything, right? But we already have list tickets here, which gives us good types, right? So ticket status, for example, is an enum, right? And that comes from, if you look at ticket on the status attribute right here, it says it's one of open or closed. And so Ash already, sort of figured out that should be an enum. It knows, what fields are required, what aren't. There's also filter and sortable input, right? So you have access to, Boolean filters, right? So, I mean, obviously you could click on these forever because you can nest them however you want. But it's a very powerful setup right out of the gate, right? So let's go ahead and just try out, let's try out using it, right? So we can say list users, query list users, or sorry, list tickets, not list users, ID, and it all works. So let's go ahead and pull in a couple other things. I say status. What else we got? We have subject, and we can query our data over a GraphQL. That was that easy. And I'll show you some of the more powerful things you can do with it, right? So I can say, let's say sort, and then we'll say field sort by subject, and the order will be descending, right? And you can see now the subjects have been sorted descending alphabetically. Let's say we only want to see the closed ones. Filter status equals should give me, doesn't like what I've done here. Let's see, filter, let's try this, see what's going on here. Filter, oh, I put it inside the list for sorting. All right, filter status equals closed. And now we're only getting the closed tickets, right? So you have this really nice GraphQL API just sort of for free, basically, on top of your resources. Okay, so let's talk about a couple more things that you can do with it. So let's go ahead now and add our representatives in. And we're going to start, instead of adding them to the API the same way that we added tickets, let's just go ahead and give them a type. We're not going to add any queries or mutations, and you'll see why in a minute. So first we'll say extensions, Ash GraphQL.resource, and here we'll just say GraphQL do type, and let's call this representative. All right, easy enough. And we'll refresh our page here. And now what you'll see is the ticket. Oh, okay, now I've refreshed the page. And you'll see that the ticket has a representative field on it that allows you to resolve that related representative. So representative ID. And now you can see we're pulling in the representative for each of these tickets. So that's pretty cool. And now what we can also do, if we go back to the representative, for some reason I keep opening plugins here. All right, so when we go back to representative, let's go ahead and say queries to say list list rep. Let's say list reps, just to show you kind of, you name it whatever you want, and then we'll map that to the read action. And now we go back into our playground, we refresh the page, and we've got list reps. So let's go ahead and use that. Let's say query list reps ID. All right, so there's only one representative in our system right now, and let's say, let's show their open ticket. Let's use those calculated things that I was talking about, the attributes and the calculations. We'll say percent open tickets, closed tickets, okay? And you can see this person has 4 closed tickets, 3 open tickets, and this kind of crazy percent open. You know, we could round this number if we wanted. There's an option for that, but you know, for now we'll leave it like this. And what you can also do is you can resolve those related tickets the same way that you could resolve the representative, right? And now I've got all their tickets. But what I think is quite interesting is, since unlike on list tickets, because it's like there's a single representative for tickets, because this is a list, you actually have a lot more options, right? So if we look at the return, this type representative here, right, it has the tickets field, and you can see you can provide limit, offset, sort, and filter to the endpoint, right, to that resolver. So let's say I only want to see 2 tickets, right? Look at that, and we can sort and filter that kind of thing, those related tickets, so that you get some subset of the related tickets for any given person. So maybe, if, for instance, if you had a priority field, or like a created app that was part of the API, you could say, show me their like 5 most, all my reps and their 5 most recently created tickets. And that would happen very efficiently because we're using a data loader under the hood. So you can see we run 2 SQL queries, one for the, actually this one is going to fetch the aggregate. So when you do aggregate queries, sometimes we run extra queries, but the main point is you're not facing a sort of n+1 issue where, you're going to run a query for every ticket or every rep in the tree, right? It's using a data loader under the hood, which some of you may be familiar with. So cool. I'll show you an example of a mutation. And let's say, let's open a ticket. And so we'll have to add some input here. So we'll say mutation, open ticket, and we'll say input is open ticket input. I think that's how you do that, right? Open ticket input. Maybe it's not liking this. We'll say open ticket input, and then we'll return the ID, or the result, and the ID, and the status, and subject. And any errors that happen will return their message. All right, and we're going to need to put some input in here, because if I run it, it's going to say, that the well, so field. So you can see this field. You can see it's saying subject is required, and that's because we haven't provided any input. So we'll say input is subject. Help me. All right, and there you go. We opened a ticket. So that was pretty easy. So now let's go ahead and say, oh, well, we realize now we need to be able to close tickets over the API, right? So we go into our ticket. Let's go ahead and tickets right here, and add our close ticket, update, close ticket, and we'll use the close action. We'll go in here, we'll refresh the page, to get our, you can see now we can close a ticket, and we'll do this all over here. So the input is input, and in this case, it doesn't actually need any input. Instead, it just needs an ID. ID, ID, and then ID. Oh, sorry, this is using company. We'll say close ticket. Close ticket. Okay, and down here in our input ID, and we'll put in the value that we had a minute ago. Right. And there's a syntax error. That's right, because this should just refer to the variable. Okay. Cannot query field close ticket. Did you mean? Yes, I typoed it. Thank you, GraphQL. Close ticket. Okay. And now we have closed our ticket. So mutations are pretty easy to hook up, just like queries. You can map to updates, destroys, creates, all the sort of stuff that you would expect. And you can see like they're not just sort of like basic create and update actions, right? You can have more complicated things that, you know, like if you want to recalculate something or whatever it is that you want to do, you can do all that sort of thing with actions, and you can put them right up in the GraphQL quite easily. And you can, I think it's something we're not really going to demonstrate here, but the fact that these are stored in Postgres is just one example of how you might do this, right? Let's say you wanted to have an API that would send an email on demand, right? You could have a resource that doesn't use the Ash Postgres data layer, but just has some actions that, you know, like you can do something like this, you know, create, send email, and then you can have, there's tools under the hood. So you can say this is a manual action, and then you can say, I'm going to do this. You pass in what's called a change, and you say, I'm going to do this by calling some code over here. So, you know, you can do sort of whatever you want with these actions. All right, and one, I think, good last thing to show is pagination. So we can add support pagination on our actions like this, and we actually do this at the sort of framework level, which is very powerful because now you can paginate in your app code in the same way that you paginate externally, right? So we're going to take over this. We had this default read action. We're going to take over that read action, mark it as primary, just because it's what's called the default read action or the primary read action. And then we'll say, okay, it supports pagination, and we'll say offset. It supports offset-based pagination. We won't dive in. There's other pagination methods. Specifically, there's key set pagination, but we're not going to dive into that right now. And so what you can see is that'll automatically update our schema here. So to return, for list tickets, we'll return a page of tickets, right? So now we need to update this. It says, hey, I need a limit, right? So let's say limit 2, and then we need to get the results of our pagination, like so. And again, if you were adding this to an API, you would probably just add, add a new field. You wouldn't structurally change the type of one of these fields like that, right? But this is we can do this now because we're just sort of doing it on the fly. But so yeah, now we have list tickets, which has a results key, and if we ask for the count inside of that, we can say, tell me, well, how many are there total, right? So I know how I can page through them. And what's quite interesting about it is the count. So you can see in here, we're going to say there's going to be a count query that's going to tell us, get the total number of count or total number of representatives. Actually, I think it doesn't run a query because we got less than we asked for back, and so we know that there are only 7. So it's actually no, actually we should have gotten 2. Yeah, so we got 2 back, so it should have done the count. Let's see. Oh yeah, right there. Select call as count. All right, I'm blind. So you can see we selected the count from the database, but if I were to go back in and I were to not ask for the count, you can see down here that it should just run the 2 queries, and yeah, so there's not going to be any count in here. And so it, kind of smart enough to only do the minimal set that it has to do to serve that request. And of course, configuration, we can say default, I guess default limit, we'll say make the default limit 10, and then if I go in here and I refresh this, then what we should see is that list tickets has limit, and it provides that default value for it. So we don't have to specify a limit by default if we want. We're just going to get 10. So I think that was a great preview of the sorts of things that you can do with Ash GraphQL. There's a lot more there, so definitely take a look. You can see it at ash-hq.org. You can talk to us in the Discord. There's a link to that on the website as well. Feel free to lodge any issues if you have questions or if the documentation isn't clear about anything like that. All the projects are up on GitHub. And yeah, happy hacking.